We began this project back at the turn of the century to study the Bay Area nonprofit sector. The San Francisco Bay Area has a storied history of activism, of involvement, of engagement. This is, I think, the fifth largest urban area in the United States, more than 9 million people. It is 3 separate urban areas, Berkeley, Oakland, San Jose, San Francisco. And yet one of the things we've seen is how ideas travel and move around the Bay Area and how people feel like they're part of something bigger than just their own little community. What's happening here could spread to other parts of the country and be useful there. But we tried to think, what are other places we could study? And so Seattle is an interesting comparison point. It's another left coast city, if you will. It's another city dominated in some respects by tech companies. You might think about, Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, 5 largest corporations in the U.S. in these 2 cities. So a natural comparison would be San Francisco, Seattle. And then we thought, why limit ourselves to the United States? Why can't we go do something bigger? Why can't we do something larger? And so an obvious place would be Shenzhen, China. It is the tech center of China. With these 3 cities, we have the leading technology centers of the world, and seeing what the role of civil society organizations is in those economic environments strikes us as really interesting. But then we want to include other cities that are not as taken up into the new economic environment, and yet are also cities that are leaders in terms of environmental causes, well regarded in terms of cultural affairs, and also cities that are struggling with, intensely torn, if you will, about immigration.
By comparing cities in the nonprofit sectors and cities around the world, we can actually learn how different nonprofit sectors respond to different kinds of problems. And the transference of that information is something that could help nonprofits in the Bay Area, it could help nonprofits in Shenzhen or Sydney or Vienna. Having that kind of information available, making that available, might actually be useful to people trying to tackle the problems in their hometown.
But what's also interesting about it is that even though these cities are in totally different parts of the world, a lot of the nonprofit organizations in those areas take similar strategies to solving the problems. They try to bring people together. As some sort of public forum where there is exchange going on about how to solve issues. They try to raise awareness. And so the solutions may differ by place, but we actually think that a lot of the reasons why solutions differ aren't because cities are so different, but because the organizations in different places are different.
This is the first time that we can actually compare the US with China, with other countries. The world right now is so divided. There are so many chaos and transformations everywhere. And I think people are facing many similar challenges. I want to really find out how people are connecting with each other, not just in their own cities, but also across the globe. Because if you go to Shenzhen and you come to Silicon Valley, people talk a very similar language. They are excited about and they're terrified by the future of technology. They talk about impact investing, they talk about effective philanthropy. All those things are not that different.
In our group team is doing work in Shenzhen, and the organizations there are very young. I think most of them are just established 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But for example, in Vienna, most of the organizations has a really long history that's dated back in the 19th century. And these organizations in the very different historical, political, and social backgrounds share the same language, share the same organizational practices, and how they do their daily work, which is just fascinating.
The team has these ambitions to map out the nonprofit sector in 5 different cities in 4 different continents. It gives a great opportunity to examine how these global cities embedding in different nation-states shapes the configuration of nonprofit sectors. I think that for intellectually, I think that would be a fascinating, comparative study for me to understand how different cities shapes the local nonprofit sectors.
I really want to give a platform for nonprofit around the world to hear each other, to share and to realize that they're not going through all the challenges and difficulties alone. Many other organizations in a different place are sharing something just very similar.